Diane Bickett is the Executive Director of the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District, also known as Cuyahoga Recycles, a public agency helping people reduce, reuse, and recycle at home, at work, and in their communities. Over the past 28 years, Diane has been talking trash and implementing programs that reduce the environmental impact of waste. Diane is past president of the Solid Waste Association of North America, Buckeye chapter, and is a graduate of the Ohio University, excuse me.
Yeah.
Diane.
My name is Diane Bickett. I've been working in the waste and recycling business essentially since 1990 when I first started at the county. And back then we were really working to expand recycling opportunities and grow curbside recycling programs and add more things to our material mix, and everybody was on board, and you all came along with us, and we want to recycle more. And then last year, we kind of hit a brick wall with China, and through a policy they implemented called the National Sword. So we're kind of at a time where we hit a perfect storm in the recycling industry. So tonight I wanted to just talk to you about what's going on, what to expect, and how you can help especially. And I entitled my talk, Why We Can't Wishcycle Our Way to Sustainable Waste Management. So, what is wishcycling? Wishcycling is putting something in the recycling bin and wishing it will get recycled. And we've all been there. We've all stood over our recycle cans and we've had a berry container in one hand, we might have had a pizza box in another hand, or a styrofoam cup or a Starbucks cup, and you figure, well, maybe I'm not sure if it can be recycled, I'll throw it in there, and someone at the sortation plant will hopefully figure out what to do with it. So we err on the side of caution, and so we throw it all in there. But the problem with that is not everything can be recycled, and we might be doing more harm than good. So our local recyclers report that people contaminate their recycling bins all the time by putting non-recyclable materials in their curbside recycling. And this wastes time, it wastes money, and it wastes your time because you're putting it in there. It wastes money at the sortation plant, and it's truly threatening the sustainability of our recycling programs today. So what is contamination? So what the recycling processors consider contamination really does go beyond the errant berry container, the stuff that you're probably standing over the bin freaking out about. Some people are putting some crazy stuff in their curbside recycling, and you probably see it when you drive down your street on trash day and you see the lid open on your cart and there's stuff sticking out of there that you know shouldn't be there. It might be wood, it might be yard waste, it might be ropes, it might be garden hoses. So these are just some of the things that our local processors report are big problems for them. One is plastic film bags, or plastic bags, or plastic film. And the reason for that is once your recycling is picked up and it goes to a processing plant, those bags, that film gets all caught up in the sortation equipment and it slows things down. They have to stop the machinery, take the box cutters and cut those things out. So that's a big problem. Other people are bagging the recyclables, so that's, those things should go loose in your cart if you have a cart for recycling. Other things that tangle in the recycling equipment, like garden hoses, are a big problem. Things that are hazardous to employees, like lithium-ion batteries. You may have seen some reports about trash trucks catching on fire, recycle plants catching on fire, because lithium-ion batteries, if they come into contact with another metal item, they can spark and cause a fire. So those are huge, and they're not meant to go in curbside recycling. Also shredded paper. That paper can be recycled, just not through curbside recycling. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then all that plastic that's just everywhere. And all those little bits and pieces of plastic, like utensils and straws and things like that, were never meant to be captured through recycling and cause problems at the plant.
So that would be like caps on bottles?
I'll talk about that in a minute too. So, recycling contamination has always been a problem for a while, but the reason that it's the focus of a lot of news stories recently is because of China. And I have a picture of a rooster here because it all started in 2017, and according to the Chinese zodiac, 2017 was the year of the rooster. So I did some research on roosters because I was trying to find a connection. And I found a really good one. One characteristic of a rooster is that it will crow to assert its territory. And that is exactly what China did last year when it announced its national sword policy. And it was then that China asserted its right to protect its environment by restricting imports of recyclables contaminated with trash. And since then, China has stopped importing some materials outright, and the remaining ones must be nearly 100% free of contamination. And the recyclers that I've spoken to said that this is really almost an impossible goal to meet. So here are some of the headlines as a result. I don't know if you can read some of them, but mainly the headlines are around recyclables headed to the landfills on the West Coast because the communities on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, export more materials to China than we do here in the Midwest. But this is having a ripple effect across the globe as recyclers try to find alternative markets. Now, there are some alternative markets in Southeast Asia. They are not able to consume all those materials that China once did, and they're now starting to close their doors as well. So this is really affecting curbside recycling programs the most because China was the main end market for mixed plastic and mixed paper collected through residential recycling programs. So a lot of that material really now has limited places to go. So this slide just shows the importance of China to global recycling. So there's the US, there's China. Before the national sword, about 70% of all of our fiber exports, which is fiber is paper and cardboard and junk mail and that sort of thing, and about 58% of our plastic, mixed plastic, was going to China. As part of this national sword policy, by 2020, China doesn't want any of it anymore. They want to completely shut their doors. So again, it's going to be big problems for us until new markets can be developed. So as a result, all this material with nowhere to go, simple supply, demand, economics, excess supply, little demand, market prices have really gone down considerably. So how is this affecting us here locally? Well, mainly it's affecting the facilities that sort our curbside recyclables. And those facilities we call MRFs, not SMRFs, but MRFs, short for Material Recovery Facility. And this map shows the facilities that process our recyclables from your curbside. It doesn't matter if you live in Beechwood or Fairview Park or Lorain County or even Summit County, that material flows through one of three facilities. Now, if you're on the west side of Cuyahoga County, more than likely it's going to go to Lorain County, to a facility owned and operated by Republic Waste. If you live on the east side, like I do, more than likely your materials are going to Kimball's Material Recovery Facility in Twinsburg, and then Waste Management also has a facility in Akron. So these facilities process about 85,000 tons of recyclables every year, and we're reliant on them. All of our communities are reliant on them to manage those materials, and these are private sector companies that operate these facilities. So short of government stepping in and building a plant, we're reliant on these companies and very dependent on them. So when the materials that go to those facilities have a lot of contamination, it creates some problems. So I'm going to try to show a video. This is a video we took at the Oberlin MRF, which is the Lorain County MRF. And we did it for, are you familiar with Cool Cleveland? They taped out there. And Dan Shavy, who's the speaker in here, is the facility manager, and he talks about the problems they have there and what should and shouldn't be going to their facility.
It's Thomas Mulready from CoolCleveland.com. We are here today in Oberlin, Ohio at Republic Services. We're talking with Dan Shavy. Dan, you guys are doing recycling here. Tell us a little bit about what happens when the trucks come in right here at the beginning.
Sure. Well, what happens is they dump their vehicles and they pick the material up out on the route, and then we take and load it into our system, which sorts it with manpower and also the equipment itself.
So you've got like machines that do some of the sorting, but you also have people on the line that are hand sorting things.
Yes, there's over 30 sorters that physically take material that we don't want on the belts off. So every contaminant that gets put into the system, we physically have to touch.
Talk a little about these contaminants, because I know it's a problem for you guys. What kinds of items are you not looking to have people put in their recycling?
Sure. Some things that have actually caused injury and a lot of damage to our equipment is scrap steel. Lawnmower blades, car parts, things of that nature. We really don't want in your toter car.
You also don't like things like ropes, right, and things that get people entangled, or needles or sharps.
Correct, and we do get that material. Garden hoses, we get on average 30 a day. We get a bowling ball a day, believe it or not. Tennis shoes, clothing, textiles. Those are all things that cause wrapping and cause us downtime.
Now, on the other hand, what can be recycled? What kinds of items do you like to see in here?
Well, actually, the majority of what you have in your home, we can take. You know, your pop bottles, your cartons, aseptic containers, aluminum cans, of course, steel cans, newspaper, junk mail, cardboard. A lot of the things you'll see in these piles, it's good stuff, but there's a lot of things that are harming the recycling industry when you're putting it in your toter.
And if people have questions, they can go to CuyahogaRecycles.org, of course, because they tell you exactly, piece by piece, what you can recycle.
Exactly, that's a great idea. Please go there, use those resources, and do the right thing and recycle the right way.
Hey, Dan, thanks so much for taking time here. It looks like you guys are quite busy.
Oh yeah, we get 300 tons in a day through the facility. Yeah, it keeps us busy. We're always kind of cleaning up a mess.
Thanks for taking a few moments.
You're welcome, thank you.
Hey, it's Thomas Mulready from CoolCleveland.com. Have a great week in Cool Cleveland.
All right. So most of you won't have the chance to go to a MRF, so now you had your chance to kind of see that they run a lot of material through there, and they rely they have magnets, and they have eddy currents and optical sorts that are designed to process certain items out of that waste stream. They're not designed to process everything. And did anybody catch the one mistake in that video? There was one item he was showing. Straw. Thank you, very good. That was put in there on purpose to, no, actually, that was just our mistake in editing. But anyway, the straw should not have gone into the bin.
What about the rubber band on the newspaper?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Thank you. Okay, there's two mistakes. No rubber bands. Thank you for pointing that out. Oh, goodness. So we talked to all the material recovery facilities over the last few years, and they all kind of want us to know a few things. One is, what I've said before, is only certain materials are recoverable through curbside recycling. Curbside recycling was never meant to take all your trash and then find a home for it. So way back when I first started, before we had single stream recycling, communities would oftentimes collect waste using a trailer, and they'd have a separate compartment, one for glass, one for paper, one for cans, etc. And that was called source separated recycling. That material tended to be cleaner than the stuff that was all commingled. So fast forward to today, how many of you have a cart for recycling in your town? Most people, okay. So the idea was give people a 64-gallon cart. They'll recycle more because it's bigger, and yes, they're recycling more, but they're also putting trash in there because they're sometimes using it as a separate trash can. And it's also big enough to take boxes, which should be broken down, but people are not doing that. The other thing they want us to know is that very few plastics are recyclable. So while we all generate more and more plastics because that's all pushed down at us from the manufacturers and the companies that package this stuff, very little is actually recyclable. I think I heard a statistic of about 9% of plastic is actually recoverable for recycling and has markets. So if you think about every piece of plastic that was ever created, only about 9% has ever been recycled. The rest is either in a landfill or in the environment in some way, shape, or form, and that's not good. The other thing is that improper recycling does threaten recycling, and that's because these facilities are meant, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, when you said few plastics, do you have a breakdown? For example,
Like
is
what
it 1 or
is
2 that we're allowed to? Or?
I will get into that too.
Okay, thanks.
So improper recycling threatens recycling because, I mean, these are private sector companies, they're trying to make money. Most of them are vertically integrated, meaning they have a landfill, they have a recycling plant, they do the collection. Right now, recycling is losing money, but they're still able to offset that through some, through the landfilling side of the business. So when we don't recycle properly and they have to sort out all that contamination, it costs money. The other thing is that recyclables are commodities and prices do fluctuate. I've been through a few cycles where things have been great, things have been bad, and they've always seemed to bounce back. We seem to be heading into a very long period of recovery until we can develop new markets. So, and the thing that's most challenging here for us in Northeast Ohio and in Ohio generally is we really do have ample landfill capacity. So as a result, landfilling is very cheap compared to places on the East Coast where prices are probably double, triple what we pay. And that's more of an incentive to recycle because then you're diverting waste from the landfills. So here you can bury a ton of trash for, if you exclude the state and taxes and other fees, it's probably what, $20 a ton? I'm looking at Steve Inney because he's a
15
He's
to
a
25 a ton, as compared to Seattle, which is $95 a ton.
There you go. Thank you, Steve. There was a question back there?
It might be better to leave it at the end, but I was talking to a major grocery store and trying to find ways that I could not purchase so much plastic from them when I'm buying my food.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not aware that plastic clamshell, like fruit baskets, are not recyclable, correct?
Right.
And so that grocery store chain is just flooding their Republic services recycle bin with all these clamshell baskets. And they said that they had no idea. Is there, what kind of education is Republic Services or you, or what can we do so that doesn't happen? Because they're clueless as a major grocery store chain.
I think that the packaging that they're putting out there is a business decision on their part. They're putting it in those clamshells because it's cheaper probably than those fiber containers, which
But
are
when
more
they have
recyclable.
waste, they're putting it into their recycling.
Oh.
They have things that aren't purchased. They said they're putting in clamshell baskets, all
Okay, which grocery store?
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods. Ooh, okay. Well, we do have a business recycling specialist. I'll send her them that their way. Moving on. So how do you recycle properly? I know you're all dying to know. I think we tend to overthink recycling. We wish everything could be recycled, but these are really the 5 core items that we should be putting out now. And some of these have value still, some of them have a negative value, but these are items that we're still telling people to put in their carts. And that includes cans, metal beverage cans, and food cans. The thing with those is make sure they're empty. Helps to rinse them out, especially if it's a food can. Cartons, like milk juice and soup cartons, aseptic cartons. Glass bottles and jars. Paper and boxes. So this is the biggest thing you can recycle out of your house is just about all that. Junk mail, newspapers, magazines, utility bills after you pay your bill, whatever. Cereal boxes, remove the liner. and of course all your Amazon boxes. But make sure when you put that stuff in your cart, they're flattened, especially the boxes, and all those little puffy plastic things are either discarded, or you can punch them and take them to your grocery store's film plastic recycling. So, is there a question?
I was wondering with shredded paper opposed to that paper.
So thank you for bringing up shredded paper, because I did mention that earlier. Shredded paper is recyclable, but if you remember that video, that material is going through most of all, it's usually put in a plastic bag, which they don't want. So it's going to be thrown out because they can't open it and sort all those little bits of paper. Those are going to contaminate the glass essentially. Shredded paper should go in a paper bag and taken to one of those River Valley paper bins or paper retriever paper bins. And if you don't know what those are like those green and yellow dumpsters that you'll see in the parking lots of schools and churches. That material will then just go to a paper plant for recycling. So that source separated paper, it still has value, but it shouldn't go in the curbside because it wasn't designed to be stored at a MRF. Yes?
Question. What about the tape on the boxes? Should you take the tape off?
That's not too big of an issue. I try to take, there's a lot of tape on there, but you really don't have to. The staples in your bills and stuff, you don't have to worry about those either. You can keep those on. So getting down to the nitty-gritty paper or plastics, everyone wants to recycle plastics 1 through 7 or plastics whatever. Bottles and jugs are what our recyclers want now only. They don't want any yogurt cups or margarine containers or any of the other types of plastics. And if you put it in your recycling, I know from talking to some of these places, they're stockpiling it. They don't have homes for that 3 through 7 mixed plastic because that was going to China. So everyone's confused about plastics because for years we told people about these numbers that were on the bottom of the container, and they had either a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And in my office is guilty of this. We encourage recyclers, take more plastic, take more plastics. And then finally they said, okay, we'll take 1 through 7 plastics. Well, now China doesn't want all that plastic anymore. A lot of it was going to China, where they used cheap labor to sort out the plastic they could recycle and couldn't recycle. The plastic they couldn't recycle is in a landfill over there. So we don't know how much of that ever really got recycled to begin with. So there are some domestic markets for other types of plastics, and I think those will grow over time. But for now, we're telling people to include bottles and jugs only. Republic just changed their website to say bottles and jugs only, and Waste Management and Rumpke also say that as well. So ignore the numbers. But they're not recyclable. We encourage people to reduce their use of plastics if possible, but we know most things come packaged in plastic, so that's not always easy. But if they can't go in the recycle bin, they have to go in the trash. Yes?
Couple of questions. I very often, if I have a glass wine bottle or something like that, I will slip it into a paper bag. Bad news?
You should just put it in your cart loose.
And hope it doesn't break. The idea of the plastic bag meaning that if it did break, at least the broken glass is within the paper. Okay, cartons, do they need to be flattened? Does it make any difference?
It doesn't really matter. I would keep them three-dimensional. The thing is, you just want to rinse out those materials, empty them, and for the bottles and stuff, put the caps back on before you put them in the trash, because the optical sorting will work better if it's a three-dimensional object versus if it's flattened.
One more question.
One more question, move on.
When we talk about the clamshells, that also includes the black microwavable plastics.
Clamshells are not, if
Well,
it's not a bottle or a
many
jug.
of them happen to be a clamshell. But they say microwavable on the bottom, and I have been recycling them. Or are we just talking about the clear ones, the fruit, or if you're building your own salad, is that what we're talking about?
We're talking about anything other than a bottle or jug, which is anything with a neck that's narrower than the body, is not recyclable at this time, so it has to get thrown out. I think I'm going to go through and then take questions at the end.
She's been trying to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go.
Okay. You referenced junk mail a few times,
Yeah.
and my curiosity is so many companies send you mail with a plastic window.
Not a big deal. You could throw it in there with the window in place. Paper, when it gets recycled, goes into a big vat. It's hydropulped, so once it goes into this big vat of water, the plastic materials will float and the fiber will be captured. So that's, and the staples too. So they're not a problem. So some general rules about home recycling, and then I'll talk about other types of recycling, is if you have a cart, place items loose, not bagged, in your cart. Empty and rinse your containers. Replace the cap on the container or throw it away, and then break down your boxes and put it in your cart. And if you get like one of those mattresses in a box, you know, those huge boxes, and we're all getting stuff, cut it so it, down to size so that that cardboard fits in the cart. Some other tips is include the recycling rules are really the same across Cuyahoga County, but they're also the same across Lorain County, Lake County, Portage County, and and somewhat in Medina County for the drop-off program there. So if you're talking to your friends and neighbors and they say, well, I do it differently here, you can say, no, the rules are the same because all that material goes to one of those 3 material recovery facilities, and they all have the same types of processing equipment. They all have the same challenges with the markets. Ignore the plastic numbers, we talked about that. Look for other recycling options. So there are opportunities to recycle other things in other places, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then, again, practice waste reduction, reduce, reuse, donate, compost. So other recycling, we have some info cards on the table over here outside the room. So we kind of color coded everything. So blue is what goes in your cart. Yellow are items that can be donated or recycled elsewhere. So that includes the things like the shredded paper that we mentioned. The plastic bags that shouldn't go in your curbside bin can usually go to Target or Heinen's or a grocery store for recycling because they have a source separated bin. Electronics, all your communities have computer recycling programs. You can go to cuyahogarecycles.org, click on your community and find out when that's going to be. Same thing with household hazardous waste. They all participate in our program for that. Shredded paper we talked about. Things like scrap metal, there's a bunch of different scrap metal recyclers. You can recycle, if you have an engine block or a lawnmower, you can take it there for recycling, get a buck or 2 maybe. Propane tanks should be recycled at any Blue Rhino location where you get your propane tank. What else is on my list here? Tires, if you buy tires, please, please, please don't bring old tires home. There's no need to do that. Pay to recycle them at the point of purchase. They will take care of them properly, hopefully. And then furniture, if you have an ugly old couch, or not so ugly, ugly old couch. I'm thinking of Fraser, but
Yeah.
there are ample donation places for old furniture. Then our other category is some items can't be recycled. They do require proper disposal. Dan Shady in the video talked about syringes. If you do home injections, don't throw them in your recycling bin because they're metal. Put them in a rigid plastic container like a laundry detergent container that has a sealable lid. Duct tape the lid so they don't get out, and then throw them in your trash. They're safe to put in the trash, you just have to have some precautions. Medication, the sheriff's office has a drop box program. Just about every police station has a container for medications, and they're really concerned about the opioid type medications, the prescription meds. That's where you should take those. You don't have to worry about, throwing away your Tylenol, but never throw medication down a sink or a toilet. The sewer district cannot handle that material, and some of those antibiotics getting into our water supply, not good. Fluorescent bulbs can go to Home Depot. They collect fluorescent bulbs there. And finally, latex paint. Everyone has latex paint. We get calls about it all the time, what to do with that. It's not hazardous. You can put it out with the regular trash. You have to dry it out first. Because when you think about a trash truck going down the street, you throw a full gallon of paint in there. They compact the truck, squishes in there, it drips all over your street. So you don't want to paint your street with your... Not enough attention is paid to composting. So most communities have leaf pickup, and they suck your leaves off the curb, and that material goes to a composting facility where they compost that down into its organic matter, and then then sometimes you can buy the compost or the wood chips from your community. You can also learn to compost in your backyard. Our office has compost seminars, and we sell compost bins. So if you haven't been to one and you want to, we have 2 style compost bins that we sell for $50 each, and they work great, especially as you're thinking as we're moving towards fall and those leaves will be coming down soon. We have a lot of resources on our website for reusing and donating. We have a book called Pass It On, which we're just about out of. We're reprinting, so I couldn't bring any tonight, but all the organizations that accept usable items for donation are listed on our website. So, how many times do you drive down your street on trash day and you see someone put an exercise bike out or a table, and it's like, what a waste, that's a usable thing that somebody can use. So we encourage you to look that up and find a home for that, and we make that easy through our book, Pass It On. And then finally, some things just have to go to a landfill, and just a word about landfills. They're not the open dumps of the past. These are highly engineered facilities that are designed to contain any pollution that might leak out of them. They're also very expensive to build, and they're also usually located in rural areas. So we don't have any landfills in Cuyahoga County that accept solid waste. We have a couple that take construction debris, but solid waste from our county is shipped really to Amish country. And so would you rather have food grown in the rural areas, or would you rather have dump sites? So another reason to practice waste reduction is to reduce our impact on people who live in those communities. I like to say, really we're not going to recycle our way out of our waste problem, but we need to reduce the amount of waste we create. And I think we all have a responsibility for that. So if you would like to connect with us, CuyahogaRecycles.org. We're all over social media. Please follow us, share our stuff. We post 4 times on Facebook. We have a blog we publish twice a month. And we're on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And we also have e-newsletters. So if you want to sign up for our e-newsletter on our website, you'll get a newsletter once or twice a month, and you'll learn about our programs and tips and things like that. I'll leave that up.
The League of Women Voters does advocacy. Could you suggest some areas that we should be advocating? Are plastic bags a problem? And what else should we be doing?
Well, one key way to be advocating would be to contact County Council and encourage them to pass the plastic bag fee that Councilwoman Simon is trying to have passed. I know there's a few people, it's stuck in committee, there's a few people on council that don't want to see that pass, and so that stalled it. And then furthermore, the bag manufacturers are a strong lobby, and they've gotten to the state legislature, and they want to have a law passed that would prevent communities from adopting plastic bag fees and bans. So that would be one thing. The other thing is to just act with your purchases. So, you know, I think the straw manufacturers are getting the message. We're seeing a lot about straws, so don't buy straws. You don't need them necessarily, or to buy a sterling straw. When I go to the grocery store, I bring my reusable bags, but I also have reusable produce bags, which are great. So you can use those to, so you don't have to get all the plastic bags, and you get them on Amazon. They're these mesh bags, and they're great.
Cuyahoga has them right in their produce section.
Oh, good.
Those mesh bags.
Okay. And there's going to be more pressure on the manufacturers to adopt producer we call them producer responsibility laws. So, I mean, there's only so much we can do. I mean, we're stuck with all the packaging that the Procter & Gamble's of the world foist upon us, and we really don't have any choice. We've got to buy shampoo, you know. I guess you could buy a shampoo bar, but most of it comes in a bottle. So we need more national legislation like they have in Europe that will require companies to design for recyclability, for instance, or reduce the amount of non-recyclable materials we're putting into the system that we have to then deal with on the back end. Yes.
What countries, because I'm really interested, you know, I'm trying very hard not to use plastic. You know, we're talking about shampoo and conditioner bars and stuff, and, you know, we're trying our hardest. But to be honest, it's like, it's almost impossible to live. Like, I love eating berries, but I can't buy a berry without a plastic clamshell box. So I really want to find ways to get the producers to change. So what are some of these countries in Europe that you're referring to? Is it kind of legislation that we could try and bring here to the States?
It is, but I don't see it happening given
Can I help
who's
answer that
sitting in the White
question?
House right now. But
Can I help answer that question?
okay.
Be aware of efforts to create new manufacturing facilities that are taking fractured gas to produce plastics. And that's happening here in Ohio. Be aware of industry that is on the threshold of creating manufacturing facilities to create more plastic from fractured gas.
There are some countries that have, they're like, you said Europe, which is kind of broad. Is there some specific countries that you can think of that?
Well, I think Germany was the first country. They had the Green Dot program. It was years ago. So they require companies that manufacture product packaging to take that back for recycling. And other countries, examples are escaping me at the moment. but they- What?
Europe is leaders in incineration. You know, almost all the waste in Europe goes to incinerators. So, you know, plastic isn't so much an issue for them.
It's true. I mean, landfills, Europe short on land, not a lot of landfill capacity. A lot of material goes to waste to energy. Netherlands and other places are looking for more trash to feed their plants, but it gets to be more of an issue. It's not as cost effective to do that waste to energy type of system here because it can't compete with our cheap landfilling. But with regards to the berry containers, I think an action we can each take is just talk to the grocer and see if they would offer alternatives. And I've known people that have...
They said no.
Well, I've known people that will take the berry container, dump it into their mesh bag, and leave the container at the store. You're right. You're right. Yes, sir.
Well, I wanted to say, I was in Germany at the end of April, and they do not take, I was lucky I had a couple of plastic bags, being a tourist. You literally had to bring your own bag, which was viable, because I would go to stop at train stations for a cup of Coke or a sandwich or something like that. Germany, they don't even, you bring your own bag. So that's one country I do know from my experience a couple months ago.
Yes.
You mentioned putting lids on containers. We're talking glass jar, metal lid.
Well, that's one exception. You could throw the metal lid, like from a pickle jar, you could just throw that in there loose because it's gonna be caught in the magnet and, you know, but I was referring to like pop bottles.
Yeah, plastic
Anything under
bottles.
2 inches will not be captured by the sortation and will end up being thrown out. There's a question?
Yeah, there's another area where people, I think, would think they're helping and they're not, with these like Chinette plates that say compostable. And I called the waste district and then I called Rust Belt Recycling.
Right.
Yes, there are places, if you bring them down to the composting facility, but it's not like you can put them in your compost, they still go in the trash, and I think people are probably believing they can put those in recycle or something.
That's true. So that any type of food contaminated paper product should not go in the recycling, and they shouldn't go in your backyard compost, because unless you have a commercial facility that has compost piles that are really, really hot with those microorganisms to eat that fiber, it will not break down. So we buy reusable or go reusable for your parties.
We can talk a little bit about Lake Erie and what's happening in terms of plastics going into the lake.
Well, so a few weeks ago, has anybody heard Sherry Mason speak? She's a PhD at New York University professor who's done a lot of research and on plastic pollution in the Great Lakes, following Eric, name I can't remember. There's another scientist that's exploring the amount of plastic gyres in the ocean. She's like, well, if there's plastic in the ocean and it's getting in the fish, there's probably plastic in the Great Lakes. And she got a grant and was able to get samples of water from the middle of every Great Lake and found plastic particles in the water, which eventually, we're consuming water from our Great Lake, Lake Erie, and so it's in drinking water, it's in tap water, it's in all the bottled water samples she sampled. There's actually more microplastics in bottled water than there is in tap water.
Say that again?
So when plastic breaks down, it doesn't degrade. So think about a plastic bag that's floating in the environment. Everything, litter will eventually, be washed into a creek, it'll be washed into the lake. That material eventually will break down into smaller and smaller particles through photodegradation. It doesn't ever go away. So what happens is the chemicals in that plastic will migrate into the water, and the microplastics will get into our drinking water, and will get into anything we use water for. So, and it will get into the fish we eat, and the chemicals will eventually, if you eat fish, be consumed by you. So it's very
Drink water.
dire. Everybody needs to drink water, but plastic water in plastic bottles has more microplastics, they found. But if you Google microplastics in water, drinking water, beer, or they've even found it in sea salt, it's permeating our environment. And so that's one good reason to, if I leave you with one thought today, it's try to reduce your use of single-use plastics, because there's nowhere for that to go other than a landfill or land or water. Yes, I'm trying to get the one.
Except burning it.
Pardon me?
Burning it.
Plastics could be used to produce energy, but we don't have any facilities here in Ohio that are waste-to-energy facilities. There is a facility in Indianapolis. They do have a waste-to-energy plant, but given the economics, maybe we'll be there someday, but I don't know. It's not going to happen here in Ohio.
If you use those filters that you put on your faucets, do they capture the mini plastics, microplastics?
I don't know, I'm not a scientist. You'll have to do a little bit of research. I would assume it would get some. But these are, these are particles you have to see with a microscope. They're not like the sediments that you normally filter through your Brita filter, from what I've heard. So, yes, sir?
I'm confused about how you put out on the tree lawn the recyclables.
Okay.
You mentioned cart,
Where do you live?
Rocky River.
Yeah, we don't have.
Okay. So Rocky River has a different system from most other communities. You still have backyard collection. Some things you put on your curb, some things they keep in your backyard, and they also have a drop-off program. But Rocky River, I believe, requires you to still bag your recycling.
Correct.
So
Correct.
for people who live in communities where you have to bag your recyclables, you can still do that. Just don't throw your wadded up Heinen's bags in that recycling.
Gotcha.
So a couple companies like Waste Management will no longer take recyclables that are bagged. So that might drive some changes in Rocky River.
Can I ask another quick question? Why is China not accepting our garbage?
Would you want to accept China's garbage?
No. I was not aware until you presented that they were accepting our garbage.
So for years and years, decades really, think of all, China had a lot of economic growth and they were the main manufacturer of all the stuff we consume. So for decades, we would bring in their products, we would backhaul to China loads of recyclable materials, bales of plastic, bales of paper, and they would make more stuff out of that material and send it back to us. But then contained in those bales, and which is what is the reason they decided to just push back, is there was hazardous waste, there was a lot of trash, and so we basically sent them dirty materials, and they accepted it because they wanted, they were growing their economy, but what that left them was a spoiled environment that they're now trying to clean up. So the new president is really behind this move to just clean up their nation, manufacture with the recyclables and raw materials they have in their country, rather than the world's garbage. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. One question here.
Plus the fact is that China's economy is growing. They're now the largest producer of automobiles, so their own domestic economy is bringing a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, very true.
So they don't need as much from the rest of us. They have their own garbage too.
Very true. Yes.
I have 2 newspapers that are delivered every day in plastic bags that say recyclable.
Oh, right.
What do I do with those?
Take them to Heinen's or Giant Eagle. There are drop-off bins for film plastic at those locations. So the reason
Any size of plastic, because it wouldn't fit the grocery, to the size of the newspaper.
I understand, but most of that film plastic, because you are keeping it out of your curbside recycling, it doesn't have to be sorted at a plant like that. It can go directly to a plastics recycler. So it is proper to recycle it at one of those other locations.
I've been putting like 2 weeks of newspapers in one plastic bag and putting it in my recyclable. I shouldn't do that?
No. Yes.
Yeah, I intercept food waste, so I know like the food bank wants the grocery stores to donate, and the Cuyahoga Food Council says they want them to donate, and like what really, that's what I would suggest for like an advocacy thing, is like we really need that feel good, good Samaritanism happening, where the employees or managers can feel good about taking a case of vegetables down the street to, maybe if it's after work or something, because there's so much of it, and I was but it would be a good load off to know, is there somebody like at the landfills that like pours out the expired milk jugs, or just gets this like watery like celery out of its packages and stuff like that, and it's just so messy. at
No,
times.
but there are commercial food waste composting operations. Kurtz Brothers does some of it. Rust Belt Riders is doing some of it. So Rust Belt Riders in particular is a growing organics company. So they have contracts with Heinen's. So Heinen's will separate their produce, their bad produce and other stuff, that organic, not meats and stuff, but the vegetables. And that material gets picked up and that food waste is then composted. So that's organics is one of the biggest areas we can capture more material. Knowing where we're kind of stuck with the containers, more than half of our waste stream is organics. It's food waste, it's yard waste, it's leaves. And so and that's material that creates methane in a landfill, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. So we would like to keep that out of the landfill, compost it, and then create then good material that we can supplement our topsoils and things like that. So.
Well, I'll reiterate just really quick what the Cuyahoga Board of Health said, that they're not going to intervene if people like remove the food waste from the waste stream, but you're not supposed to give it to the public. So if you don't mind washing stuff, there's plenty of surplus.
Yeah, there are rules with donating food, and I think
Yeah.
we have a page on our website that talks about that. Yes,
We
ma'am?
live in a community that does not have carts. They pick up in little trucks that have a recyclable front, a large trash rear. I have been told a couple of times by the guys driving those carts that if my bag with all my paper, newspaper, mail, et cetera, isn't in a blue recyclable plastic bag, they won't treat it as, they'll treat it as trash because they say it'll blow away if we don't have a bag enough.
Is that Rocky River?
No, it's Pepper Pike.
Oh, Pepper Pike.
Rocky River handles their recycling material over and over and over again. You might notice that your recycling ends up on your neighbor's tree lawn until another truck comes and loads it. In the meanwhile, your neighbor could be wallowing in all of your loose paper. So everything has to be in a tied blue plastic bag in order to be recycled.
Well, that's why carts are so great, because they contain that material and you have less litter as a result. But
There's a way that we can make Rocky River change. I think everybody here is on board.
I've been, I worked with the mayor years ago, and that was a public meeting. I don't want to have to repeat. There's a lot of pushback on getting rid of the backyard collection in favor of automated collection using carts.
So who removes the blue plastic bags from Rocky River's recyclables? Does Rocky River remove the plastic bags before they send it?
No, they would take it to Republic, Murph, and Oberlin, the one you saw. I believe they have some type of a way to break those bags open so that material will get recovered, but it's time consuming and costly for the plant. So they're not, the plant owners aren't in favor of that method anyway. They're trying to phase that out. Yes?
For security reasons, I shred all my old bills, bank statements, and everything like that. My shredder goes a lot. Because now I have a bin where I throw, for the paper retrieval, the newspaper and everything, a plastic bin. You're saying I should just throw the shredded, empty the shredder, stuff in the shredder right in the bin?
No, I put it in a paper bag.
Paper bag,
Yeah.
because the paper bags you can't find much anymore, except the leaf ones.
Whole Foods has them. Trader Joe's.
I don't go to Whole Foods, they're too expensive.
Like 4 cents at Aldi's.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to that, because
Yeah.
you don't want shredded paper all over the community.
Yeah, that's what I was
and they
wondering,
dump
because I
those,
put it in a plastic bag.
My church will accept it, and we have a big bin.
Yes.
And they say, but put it in a bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the only way to get it there, I'm sure the company that is accepting that is, figuring out what to do with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, good
Yeah.
question.